After weeks of silence, this man finally opened his eyes inside the hospital. In reality, he had been discovered 40 years into the future. Once upon a time, Seo was a terrifying beast. His team couldn't win the fight, so he stepped in by himself while everyone held their breath in fear. He told them all they had to do was write down his tale as a great hero. After that, Seo tied his fate to everyone else's and spent decades battling endless monsters. But after 20 long years, he finally opened his eyes in the hospital. The world had changed around him, but he stayed exactly the same. When Seo looked at his stats, he was stunned by what he saw. With his stolen powers to see through things and throw them, he has also unlocked a wild new trait called immortality, making him untouchable by death in a world where only the mightiest survive. Humans went about their day with no idea what was coming. They had no idea they weren't by themselves. A man walking down the street bumped into a person with a hood up and said, "Watch where you're going." Another civilization was thriving right here on Earth. It showed that a people called the Bureau lived beneath the Earth, hidden away from humans. A whole new people rose from a huge blast, living apart from everyone on the surface. The sudden attack by the Bureau turned everything into chaos. Now, everyone knew that our species was on the very edge of disappearing forever. Soon the humans fought back, but their weapons just bounced off without a scratch. The creatures used their strange powers to protect themselves. They could shut down even the deadliest weapons. Soon the tide turned as the Bureau's strange powers started changing people, giving some special abilities that made them turn into espers. People with these special gifts started fighting against their enemies. They beat the monsters in the underground city one by one, which lit a fire of hope for everyone until the big final door finally swung open. Back in the spring of 2005, 7 of the world's most powerful mind readers came together. They charged into the Burrowers' final hideout and ended the long war. Because of their victory, the world cheered them as the 7 heroes who saved all of humanity. They earned their fame by stepping out of a limousine into a wall of camera flashes. The heroes were welcomed by the crowds and reporters who showered them with huge piles of money and deep respect. But one person, Seaman Yaup, never came back. The leader of the 7 heroes couldn't take any of the rewards for himself. Instead, they celebrated him by revealing a statue. The heroes who lived went on to be famous stars, while the one who died grew into a legend worthy of a giant statue. Yet 17 years later, a narrator declared a critical moment at the international arena in Seoul. Trance struck at Korea, but the Korean teams had no time to react. Then the narrator shouted the culprit's name, Nathan Bernard. He was tearing the opposing team apart. The French player charged at his rival and slammed him to the ground. Nathan took down 6 enemies all by himself. A man watched the broadcast, wondering if anyone like him had ever played since the International League started. The commentators shouted that he had become one of the top 3 espers of his time, but the national team was moments away from losing everything. Only Baek Hae-in was left standing for Korea. Despite having almost no hope of winning, Baek Hae-in sprinted straight at Nathan. Then she swung her famous whip straight at her foe to attack head-on. The crowd and the coach leaned in to watch the moment unfold. Han slammed her weapon straight into him without any warning. Nathan said it was exactly what he expected from the daughter of one of the 7 heroes. He then said that she would never win with a team like that. Suddenly, the French player launched a surprise counterattack and beat her. Korea's team stumbled badly in their match, failing to beat a single opponent, while Nathan Bernard stood out as the true hero of the game. The crowd sighed, remembering how Korean espers once ruled the whole age. The coach admitted that even though they had conquered many dungeons, they had somehow fallen behind in this new age. The loss hit Coach Baek Ya so hard it felt like a crushing blow, and it was a painful shame for a nation that had once raised heroes like Semin Yap and Baek Ju. He squeezed the railing tight as he faced total defeat. The commentators admitted that even though they were playing a tough team, the game was terrible and they knew the fans would be upset. Online messages filled with anger showed how upset the public was about the game's result. People kept criticizing the online coach, one of the 7 heroes, and asking why he didn't join the competition. The crowd booed and yelled insults, demanding a new national team and insisting Baek Hae-in was their only player. A fan shouted that he hadn't paid to see this game. Baek Ju, one of the 7 heroes, looked at the empty game pods and sighed at the mess. In his 3rd match leading the national team, he lost again. The player cut her link to the module, leaving the battlefield behind. She pointed out that the crowd seemed to be saying everyone except Han was just a spare part that could be swapped out. Then she wondered if the legendary power of Korean espers had finally faded into history. The coach paced the hallway, shaking his head and saying our spirit and skills are gone and the best days are long behind us. He then realized the best of them had all passed away. And he came to a sudden halt, right in the middle of the hallway. Then he let out a sigh, shouted Yup's name, and Jay looked up from an old photo on the wall. He wished his friend were still alive. Someone stepped out from the doorway and told him it was time to head to the interviews. The young man told everyone that they were all waiting. The coach let out a heavy sigh when he heard the warning. He agreed to head over and say sorry to his fellow citizens. Then he patted the young man on the shoulder and explained that was the only reason they'd chosen him to be a coach. around and admitted they couldn't win because the team was too weak and didn't have the right mindset. His assistant insisted he hadn't been training long and this was only just getting started. But the man told him he had to hand in his resignation right then during the interview. He stepped toward the door, insisting that without Superhuman Yap walking through it, there was no hope for the national team. The coach told himself he had to grab this chance. He finally made up his mind that he had to quit this time. All of a sudden, a phone started ringing inside his jacket pocket. The call came from the association president, and he feared it was just another lecture. He picked up the phone, and the president asked if he'd heard the news. Jay replied that he watched with his own eyes how the national team lost and brought shame to the country. But the president said no, and the coach wanted to know what was really going on. Shocked by the news, the coach asked what he had just said. A figure dropped from the sky at breakneck speed through a swirling portal. The figure dropped right into the middle of the busy square. The loud crash of the landing made everyone nearby jump in surprise. In Gwanghwamun Square, crowds screamed that a knight in armor had crashed from the sky right near the statues of Admiral Yi Zun-shin and King Sejong the Great. The third statue stood for the single hero who gave his life to save his 6 friends. And there, sitting right at the feet of the broken statue, was Superhuman Yap himself. As the crowd filmed him and shouted his name to confirm it was Superhuman Yap, the president yelled over the phone asking if he was deaf and why he couldn't understand a word. Before the statue honoring him, the hero slowly raised his head. The president then shared the big news that Yap had come back safe. In a memory from the past, Yap stands alone against a swarm of shadow monsters. He raises his shield to block a huge hit from a monster. He stands ready as countless enemies rush toward him to attack. Dark shapes lock eyes with him before lunging straight at him. The heavy dungeon doors slam shut right behind him. He locks the dungeon doors behind him, steps out to face the army of monsters and their master alone, and readies himself for the fight ahead. The dungeon master watches him from up high. Then he screams for them to battle until one of them is dead. Suddenly, a man jolted upright in his hospital bed. He pants hard, sitting on the edge of the bed. A woman steps into the room and announces that he has finally woken up. He reaches up to hold his head, wondering where he might be. The nurse tells him he's in a hospital and asks how he's feeling. He looks confused after hearing what he just heard. Then he is stunned to discover it's 2021, not 2005. Shaking with agitation, he asks her how she could forget that he stepped into the final dungeon back in 2005. She tells him he needs to know what's really going on. She flips on the TV and tells him to sit and watch. A news anchor starts the daily broadcast with a report on Superhuman Yap. The report says the leader of the 7 heroes is back and alive after 17 long years. The journalist says he dropped from the sky, ended up unconscious, but only with a few small scrapes. The news also says that after 17 years have gone by, he hasn't aged a day. Experts believe a glitch in the fabric of space and time caused the crash. Once the report was done, he couldn't believe that 17 years had really passed, feeling like it was just 2005, only a few days ago. The nurse nods and explains that the loud noise outside is exactly because of that. She walks over to the window and warns that reporters have been waiting outside since he got there. He gazes at the sea of reporters and sighs, realizing that even after 17 years, nothing has changed. Next, he asks for a mirror, and the nurse says she'll run to get one for him. She passes him the mirror and asks if it works for him. He stares into the mirror and sees that time has stopped, leaving him looking exactly as he always has. He thinks it's impossible to look this old at 47, and wonders if this really is his life after 17 years. Suddenly he realizes something important. He frantically searches for a way to find all his money. The nurse tells him that his will left everything to a children's fund, which makes him very sad, and then she says his house is now a museum called Superhuman Yap's house. Next, he turns the conversation to his car, the one he sold at a charity auction. He is completely heartbroken by the news. He realizes he can't stay in a museum any longer and finds himself with no home and no money. Superhuman Yap sighs, wishing he had held back a little for himself if he'd known back then. The nurse gently tells him that nobody will leave him alone because Mr. Baek Jae-ho has already reached out. She says he promised to get to the hospital very soon. He nods in agreement, and the nurse tells him she's going to leave him alone but to ring the bell if he needs anything. Even though he's staring right at it with his own eyes, he still can't believe what he's seeing. He decides to wait until later to ask Jay for the details, and for now he'll focus on checking his own health. He flicks on his scanner eyes. This power, which made him the strongest in the world, lets him see and understand everything about his enemy. He can peek not just at the powers working now, but also spot those sleeping ones that will wake up later. Because of this, he grew faster than anyone else could imagine. Because of this, he was able to lead dungeon raids right at the start of his career. He remembers the day a young man begged to be his student. That young man, who was named Jay, would soon join the 7 heroes. Superhuman Yap frowned and called him a failure, only to realize his student was actually a hidden genius with huge potential. He accepts the young man, but warns that survival isn't guaranteed, so the youth promises to try his hardest. Back in the present, he checks himself and finds that his strength, speed, and agility are exactly as they were before. He then sees that his mind has raced up to a. He can't figure out how this is possible since the highest skill level for a human is supposed to be 100. Also, he spots another change in his status. He discovers a strange new power he never had before. He can't die. He can't believe a power this strong exists, especially when new abilities only appear under very special conditions. He then guesses he probably picked it up during his last battle in the dungeon. Just as he starts to understand what it means, a loud noise suddenly breaks his concentration. Hearing someone call out his name, Yopi turns to look toward the sound. Just as we reach the door, Big J-Ho pops up out of nowhere. Some Yop stared right at the man standing in front of him. He then asks if his name is Jay. Jay wipes the tears from his eyes and tells everyone he's really back. He tells people that he has grown much weaker. JJ dries his tears and says things have been peaceful. Later on the rooftop, Yap leans in to ask if he's finally stopped crying. Jay tells him to wait until he's old, but tears spill anyway while Yap insists he's still young and knows nothing about it. Yap then shifts the topic and asks if he kept his word. Jay asks what that promise was. Yap nudges him to recall his own story, and his friend finally remembers. He then reveals he hired a famous fantasy ghostwriter, and Yap wonders if the tale begins with him hatching from an egg. Not only did a book and a film turn him into a legendary figure, but even their messy stories went viral and made the movie a global box office smash. But just asks why that even matters. He vents that he thought he died in the dungeon, only to wake up 17 years later in a hospital, and even though he knows he's not dreaming, it's still hard to accept. And to make things even worse, he saved the world but is now broke and sleeping on the streets. JJO offers comfort, reminding him that friends are there to help, especially when it comes to money. Yap notices that he has truly grown up and wonders if he has earned money and built a business in the past 17 years. His friend says he made his reward money in dungeons, but you can only eat and rest so much before you've had enough. He wonders how a fool like him could stay rich instead of going broke running his business. Jay admitted he'd been thinking the same thing, so he hired a pro to take care of everything. Yap then asks if he's out of work, but he shakes his head and says he still has a job. Curious, he asks what his friend does, and Jay reveals that he is the head coach of the national team. Yap wonders why he spoke so quietly and questions what kind of coach he is, but Jay tells him to wait a moment. He pulls out his phone with a lit match on the screen and asks his friend to have a look. Yelp peers at the pictures on your phone. He wonders if those aren't the dungeons they raided, and if they didn't vanish, but his friend explains it's just a virtual reality game called Battleground. Yahoo tells us that virtual reality dungeons are built where two teams battle for fun. Once the fighting stopped, they started using espers to run a business that quickly became the world's biggest game. He jokes that it looks like child's play, but his friend reminds him that even the best players could stand against the 7 heroes, and the World Cup ranking is a nation's pride. Yap then asks just what spot Korea holds on the list. Jay stops in his tracks, caught off guard by the question. He wonders if his friend's hearing is failing as he gets older, then asks about Korea's ranking once more. Yap insists that Korea deserves a top spot because it is home to so many powerful espers. Honestly, he starts to say that Korea is last in the game, and Yap's cup tumbles off the edge. For a brief second, both of them fall quiet. Yap turns and asks what happens when the monster is gone, only to find that the hero who defeated it has become the next evil. Inside the car, some Yap turns to Beg Jay and asks what he means. Big Joe says that's why their country turned weak in the battleground, leaving Yopi wondering how that could possibly make sense. Someone Yop realizes that the leaders grew scared of espers after the war and stopped evolving because they feared being challenged. Jay kept explaining that the battleground was locked down because the nation wanted to control every powerful esper, even Jay himself. And Yep says he can picture it, so he guesses that all the powerful Korean espers left the country to become athletes or coaches. Baek Jae-sho chuckles and says he should have broken the legs of the scoundrels who used to try to use them. Yap tells him that instead of staying silent, he used his words to stand up to ministers and presidents who kept taking advantage of everyone. Glancing in the rearview mirror, BCJ notes that they had to begin from nothing and points out that the average for athletes is quite low. He looks to some Yap to carry on, only to be stopped right away with a flat no. Jay complains that Yap won't let him speak, already knowing he wants to join the battleground, while the older man insists it's a waste for someone in their prime. Bolf says it's not wasted, and he's done wanting to be an esper since ending that life in the last dungeon, but Yahoo insists it's just a sport now. He sharply replies that he never felt responsible and wonders if he looks like the kind of person who would ever fight for others. Yep explains that as a young man, he struggled just to stay alive, but once he became an esper, he finally got the recognition he deserved. Finally, he asks if he can just live for himself now. He kept talking about how the news would go wild with headlines about the world's savior coming back to save Korea and how everyone would start expecting so much from him. Baek Jae then asks if he's truly not into the battleground, and Simon Yaup replies no, because he hates how it feels like a circus. Jae lets out a sigh and admits there's no point in trying anymore. Yap watches him in silence, but Baek Jae insists that the nation's espers aren't a lost cause, prompting Yap to ask what he means before he reveals they still have espers like her. A billboard on the road shows Baek Han's picture, and Yaup remarks how stunning she looks. Then Baek Yaho steps forward and shows that she is his daughter. Is startled, recalling Han as a tiny 6-year-old, but Hyaho gently corrects him, reminding him that 17 years have flown by and she is now 23. He tries to brush it off by saying she's beautiful and that 17 years have flown by, but he still sees traces of her childhood face. Hyaho quickly tells Yop to stop and says he is sorry. The car rolls down the road beneath the dark night sky. They finally arrive at their destination, a big, modern house. Ike, Hyefo's wife Hansi, steps out and shouts Yop's name. She welcomes him back with joy, after what feels like forever, but he jokes that to him it was just a single week. Siam Yop jokes that he looks much older after just 1 week, and Sun Shi laughs at his silliness. She tells her husband he must be tired from driving, but he says it was the least he could do for a friend he thought was dead for 17 years. As Yop watches the couple, he finally realizes the truth. He has truly survived and come back. He suddenly understands that he has found a calm world where there are no wars or dangerous dungeons to fight. Now standing right in front of that house, he finds himself wondering what path his life will take next. So for now, he takes a moment to unwind and reaches for the remote. While Summon Yap lounges on the sofa wondering if anything worth watching is on, a sudden surprise flashes on the screen. He sits up to watch the Stairs to Hell replay, celebrating with curiosity about how it ends. He clenches his fists and shouts, "This is it," while Yayup reveals that this very moment is why he survived. Baekju steps into the room and hears someone shouting that they're going to marathon the whole series with a mountain of snacks. He also says he'll finally watch every show he missed since 2005, which leaves Joe wide-eyed with shock at the thought. Jay rushes over, desperate to know if he'll really stay home to catch all the shows he missed. Someone tells him he can do whatever he wants, and the other man reluctantly agrees, but Baek Jae pulls back the curtain to reveal reporters who have been waiting outside for days and refuse to leave until they get a look at him. Then Yup rises from the sofa to take a look. On the other side of the window, a huge crowd of reporters is gathered. He spins around and shouts at them, calling them annoying leeches. Realizing he had no choice, he pushed himself up from the sofa. Finally, Siamun Yaup tells Jay to round up all the reporters so they're ready for tomorrow. He says he'll bring them all together to tell them it's time to leave his life. The next day, inside a big hall, flashes of cameras lit up the room as the press conference began. As Soon Yaup and Baek Jae-ho stepped onto the stage, reporters noted that he looked calm and that the whole event had wrapped up faster than anyone expected. The announcer shouts that the press conference has begun, and Yaup stands ready as the camera flashes go off. Clutching the microphone, he steps forward to introduce himself and notes that, as everyone can see, he has returned to find a situation just as strange to him as it is to them. Beside him, Hyawa watches with relief, convinced that he's got this right this time. Yap keeps going, saying he's not grateful at all, and that anyone can ask their questions, and then get out of his life. Jahu sees that nothing has changed inside him, so he calls for them to ask their questions one at a time. When asked how he escaped the final dungeon, Sman Yap admits he has no idea and just woke up in the hospital. Next, he claims he has no memory of the last 17 years, admits he hasn't spoken to the other heroes, and refuses to take back his. He asks for the next question and points to a reporter raising his hand. The man asks if Yop has heard about the Coach Baek Jae battleground, and Yop nods to say he knows about it. Then the reporter asks him if he plans to become a battleground player. The crowd of reporters started whispering about that question. Big J just watches as the question he's been waiting for is finally spoken. Omanop shakes his head and says he isn't interested at all. The reporter then asks him why he did it. He plainly says he isn't interested, but the man pushes him by asking if he's afraid. On the screen, Sman Yap points and says the only thing missing there is the hair on his head. He says battleground doesn't seem fun to him and he won't act like a clown just to make them laugh. Yap hopes his curiosity has been satisfied so that no one bothers him anymore. He said goodbye to them before turning to leave. If Ekyaho is turning to go, someone stops him and a reporter asks to ask one last question before he leaves. Intigiro is Tamop stands quiet for a heartbeat, then whispers the name Gerald Walker over and over. The reporter said he's a famous player in the US, a true hero for his team's tankers. Hyop asks if he is the strongest, but the man shakes his head and says there are actually 3 players at the very top. 3 fighters stood ready, Nathan from France, Roy from Ireland, and Daniel from Germany. The reporter explains that while Walker is a great player, he isn't one of the top 3. MC and Yap sighed, letting out a breath that said he finally understood that 17 years had slipped away. He turns around and tells Walker not to act so confident if he's not even in the top 3. He also says that if he wants to fight without using the battleground, he should come meet him in person. Then Yelp points a finger and says he'll personally dig a grave in the backyard for him. In a different room, the broadcast plays on a giant TV screen. Zachary Wood, the head of the player agency, leans in and asks Walker if he heard that news. A hand squeezes the remote control until it cracks. But Walker shouts Wood's name and then urgently orders everyone to get the jet ready for Korea right now. An official game against the United States has been announced. Bike J called on the phone, confused about how this could happen so quickly. But Yap grumbles about the loud noise and asks Bike Yaho to step outside, and Bike Yaho agrees right away. Yap shouts that he can't hear the TV and asks what's going on, and Bike Yaho tells him there's a big match happening in 2 weeks. He just shrugs and says it doesn't matter, but Beck J throws Gerald Walker's name right in his face to blame him. In a moment, Yaup wonders who that person really is. Beck J reminds him that he promised to bury this man in the backyard, and Semin Yaup finally remembers. He keeps insisting the man is still angry over that public humiliation, but Seomin Yaup just sees him as petty. Beck J says that since he can't take on Yaup in battle, he will turn his anger toward the Korean team instead. Seomin Yaup wonders what the team needs him for, and thinks the other guy is strange. Beck J simply puts a hand to his head. He then tells his friend to stop being sad, promising to have a great time in his place. Seomin Yaup suddenly sits up and asks about the national team's match. He wonders if Hyeon will come, even though she plays for the national team. Meanwhile, Beck Hyeon gets home and tells her mom she's back. Yap jumps with a start right there on the couch. Elsewhere, Hyeon's mom greets her with a surprised smile at her early arrival. Hyeon tells how she hurried over the moment she heard Uncle Yop had arrived, eager to catch a glimpse of him. She asks where her uncle is, and her mother says he's sitting in the living room. Semin Yaup waves hello to them while sitting on the couch. Hyeon stares at him, then bolts forward and dumps him onto the couch. He grumbles that she nearly killed him, but Hyeon just beams with joy that he's finally back. Semin Yaup gently pats her head, admitting he was scared she might have forgotten him. She promises she could never do it, reminding him that he always brought her sweets her parents forbade. He remarks that she's grown up so quickly, but Han quickly points out she's already 23. Hyeon wonders if he returned for the big game, but he says he only came to see her and the match doesn't matter. She slides closer on the couch to whisper her words. Then Hyeon asks if he really doesn't want to play Battlefield. Ya wonders if Jo sent her to change his mind but quickly shuts the subject down, saying he's not interested. Han keeps pushing to know the reason, but Seomin Ya just says her uncle is busy with lots of things. She grabs his arm and begs to try one last gentle request, but he says it won't work at all. Hyeon claims he's changed, but Seomin Yaup fires back, saying it's actually them who've changed. She looks away, remembering how he used to do everything she asked for, only for him to reply that back then she just wanted snacks. Aoas turns around to face him. She invites him to an avatar check at the league, but Seomin Yaup asks what an avatar actually is. He glances at the TV and lets it be known that he doesn't want to go. Han begs, saying her dad can't come since he's got something important to do. Anop finally gives up and asks where they are going. She smiles and says he will see. When they reach the Korean Battlefield Association, someone was already waiting for them at the front door. When the staff member beckons them to follow him down a hallway filled with tech, Min Yaup and Baek On trail behind two staff members. One of the men tells Hyeon they'll start with her avatar check, and she nods in agreement. Then the system checks the weapons and armor to bring the character to life. Ian snaps on his helmet and links up. Then her digital self appears in the virtual world. From the control room, Seomin Yaup watches Hyeon's request closely. In the virtual world, she calls for a monster to practice her moves, and a big wolf-like beast appears right before her. Yap watches the fight on the screen and wonders if it could really happen. The staff member says that Battlefield is a virtual reality sport that brings everything to life. Semin Yaup remarks that the simulation feels just like real life, so he decides to stay and watch and see just how skilled Hyeon truly is. The beast rushes forward fast. As the monster springs toward her, Hyeon is ready with her whip to strike back. She jumps high to avoid the danger. She wraps her whip around the creature's neck and yanks it away, hurling the beast far into the distance. Hyeon steps forward with her sword and dagger ready to strike the creature. She strikes the monster right down the middle, splitting it in two. She watches to see if her attack worked. The system says the avatar sync is all done, so you can now end the connection. Hyeon cracks a smile. Outside the simulation, she rushes to Semin Yaup to ask how her performance went. He warns that she still has a long road ahead, but Hyeon dares him to try anyway. Sumop tries to say no, but she stops him and says it's just so he can make an avatar. She says she heard stories about his strength, but she wants to see it with her own eyes. Hyeon keeps talking, saying that by the time she was old enough to watch him fight, he had already gone. She looks at him, and after a quiet pause, Seomin Yaup sighs and agrees. He finally agrees to take the test one more time just for her, and Han is over the moon with happiness. The staff member walks over and asks if Seomin Yaup will take the test too. The man says they'd usually need to measure everything first, but the staff member replies that since this isn't an official match, they can skip right to the test. Noyop asks if he can come in just as he is, with no gear and only in his tracksuit. Then he tells Semen Yaup to grab a weapon while two men struggle to bring a spear and shield. Semen Yaup held the gear, amazed that it felt so light, but the staff member explained it was the standard for the battlefield. He nods that he's ready and steps into the test chamber. Yup says that just the spear is enough and tells them to start. Inside the simulation, he gets ready to step into the virtual dungeon and gives it a try. The system scans Semen Yap's data and starts building his digital self. The staff member asks, "Can you still hear me?" Suddenly, Sumop appears in a perfect digital copy of the test room. He says it feels just like walking through the doors of a dungeon. The staff member assures us there won't be any syncing problems, and Hyan wishes him good luck. While stretching, he asks for a monster like the one Hyan faced, and the staff member says yes. Then someone pressed a button, and suddenly a creature started to appear in the arena. A massive creature steps into view, and Sman Yaup knows instantly that it is a Salaboon. He notices it looks different, and the staff member explains that it's a special monster that can only be defeated using aura. The man says they used every piece of data they had to build the strongest creature they could possibly make. The Salaboon lunges at him, but Siam Yaup slips away just in time. He then stares deep into the creature's eyes. Siam Yaup thinks the spear is no good, and tosses it aside. Then he stands his ground and strikes the monster with one powerful hit. Back in the control room, Hyan and the staff member stared at the scene, completely shocked by what they were seeing. The staff member wonders if Semen Yaup just sent the monster flying with a single flick to the head, but Semen downplays it as nothing special. The guy in the control room warns that taking down Salaboons isn't going to be easy. Semen tells them to send another fighter so he can try out a new idea. A new creature suddenly appears, and he realizes the perfect place to test it. He complains that the monster wasn't strong enough to warm him up and asks if there's nothing else he can do, but a voice calls him the world's best Esper, causing Sumup to turn around upon hearing the foreign language. Back in the control room, the system jumps into alert mode, and everyone starts guessing what's going on. In one round, the staff member frantically fumbles with the panel, trying desperately to get the situation under control. A warning flashes on the screen, shouting that someone is trying to sneak in from the outside. A new warrior carrying an axe and shield steps into the fiery arena. After landing, the newcomer asks Saimo Minyap if she's still open to a fight. Someone Yop just stares at him without saying a word. The warrior taunts him, claiming he stayed silent because he never thought he would actually arrive. He then vows to write there that the title of the 7 heroes is nothing more than an empty name. The warrior rushes at breakneck speed straight towards Semen Yaup. He just stands there and watches the attack coming his way. The blow strikes the ground with a huge thud. With his shield shattered, the warrior looks around to find where his enemy vanished. A voice from behind his ear asked, "Are you scared?" Suddenly Semen Yaup pops up to say no. He then says that this will finally be a proper test. He grabs his spear and gets ready to fight. The two rivals lock eyes from afar in the arena. Inside the control room, Bayon asks what's going on. She hears someone say, "Don't worry." Suddenly the control room door swings open. Tian and the worker both turn their heads toward the door. Baek Jae steps in to say he has cleared everything, so there is no need to worry. Han spots him as the club president and asks him about his promise to stay busy. Bisho says they've already spoken, but the local team never heard the news. Park Ginty, the association's vice president, turns to Ms. Moss and asks if that is all. Emma Moss, Gerald Walker's boss, thanked everyone for helping with this weird ask. Back then, Baek Yaho stood in front of Siam Yaup with a table piled high with food. Park Ginty watches the fight unfold. And wins this chance might just get Saman Yaup interested in the battlefield. In the arena, the two fighters swing their weapons in a blur of speed. Suddenly, Sum Yop's spear and Gerald Walker's axe crash together in a fierce battle. The crash creates a powerful squeeze in the spot where they hit. Siop slides back, stopping his rush by slapping his hand down on the ground. Gerald Walker readies his axe for another strike. Saman Yaup watches his opponent closely after the attack. He then turns on his scanner eyes. A screen pops up showing Gerald Walker's details. The tests show he's at his strongest and most enduring, making him the ideal choice for a tank role. Showman Yap realizes his opponent is tougher than he looks. Gerald Walker asks why he's just staring at me instead of fighting. Shaman Ya smiles to show he's strong. He suddenly recalls something important as he thinks about his opponent's power. The power he learned. So he decides to test the power he gained in the hospital against this new enemy. Shaman Yop dashes forward at lightning speed, his spear leading the way. Gerald Walker readied himself for the strike and closed in, only to halt his rush just inches from his foe's face. The warrior can't help but wonder why he halted just before getting to him. Soman Yop just stares right at him, face to face. Then he says he's got something fun to show him. He slams his hand into the earth, sending a shockwave that cracks the ground around him. In the control room, Hyun calls out to her uncle. Gerald Walker wondered why he just stood there and didn't move to dodge the attack. Gerald Walker watched Summon Yaup pause right before the attack, looking like he wanted to give his life. Summon Yaup takes a hard hit right in the chest. Suddenly, a huge attack smashes right into Gerald Walker. The force of the crash knocks him flying backward. The arena floor cracks and splinters as a heavy object punches its way through. Gerald Walker stood frozen, baffled by the fact that his opponent, who should have been dead, was still alive. A sharp cough rises through the thick dust. A voice grumbles about the pointless smoke hanging over everything. In the control room, everyone stares at the scene, confused by what they see. Gerald Walker turns around to see that there is no way out. Again, Yaup stood up from the wreckage without a scratch and asked what he was thinking. He then remembers his promise to show something fun and reveals that he never actually dies. Superhuman Yaup asked if the screen showing his immortality power looked cool to him. Gerald Walker couldn't believe he had made it through that attack. He tells us that coming back to life gave him a new special power called immortality, proving the test was a success. Superhuman Yaup notices his wounds mending all by themselves and decides that fighting that way won't work. He reaches out to the nervous operator in the control room. He tells the confused staff member that he can't die thanks to a special power he earned by surviving the final dungeon. Superhuman Yaup thinks the power is unfair and asks if it can be blocked, so the staff member easily deactivates his immortality from the control panel. Gerald Walker listens in on the talk. Matt admits he only tested his power because it was his first time, but he taunts his rival by saying he did it to stop the guy from blaming immortality for losing. Gerald Walker grips his weapon tighter and steps forward across the cracked floor. He throws down his spear and shield to mock his opponent's arrogance, but the hero Superhuman Yaup catches the flying weapon in midair and proves he is far stronger than anyone thought. Gerald Walker decides to judge it himself and orders him to stand up so they can fight without any more excuses. Superhuman Yaup crouches low to ask him that he must beat the top 3 fighters before he even thinks of challenging him. Yaup keeps talking, saying he heard he's not even in the top 3. Gerald Walker rushes forward to strike, and Yaup asks if he found a weak spot. The warrior then leaps high into the sky. They trade a dizzying flurry of strikes with their weapons, and the fierce battle between the spear and the axe rages on. After getting hit, he hits the ground and looks around to find his opponent is gone. Then Superhuman Yaup shows up behind him and lets him know he's there. Walker spins around just as Superhuman Yaup lunges from behind, aiming his spear's sharp point at his back. The punch lands straight on his opponent's face. As Gerald Walker flies backward through the air, Superhuman Yaup readies his spear. He sees that his opponent moved fast even though they couldn't see well. But then he realizes it's time to end the fight. He narrows his eyes on his next move, then in one sudden flash, he hurls the spear with all his might. The spear from the throne strikes Gerald Walker's shield with a powerful thud. Then the weapon blasts against the wall on the other side of the arena. When Yaup spins around with a bright grin on his face. Gerald Walker hit the ground hard, leaning on his shield as he saw the spear veer at the last second, proving his opponent had serious skill. Then Yaup just spread his arms wide and shouted that he had won. Gerald Walker drops to his knees and insists the battle isn't finished, claiming he let the shot go wide on purpose. His rival just stares at him, clueless about what's happening. Yaup tells him to grab a smaller shield and stop playing the part of a big, slow tank. He keeps explaining that he's offering these tips because the shield blocks his view. Gerald Walker flinches when someone talks about his limited field of vision. The Superhuman Yaup figures that picking the shield lets him take a quick look around before fighting, but he warns that clever enemies will easily turn that extra time against him. Gerald Walker asks if he's just mocking him, but Superhuman Yaup replies that even with the extra help, he still wouldn't win. Gerald Walker decides to take a chance. Everyone in the control room keeps their eyes glued to the screen, waiting to see what he decides. Dek J can't believe Yaup is giving him advice, especially since he's already such a fierce fighter. Yaup turns to leave, telling everyone he's done his part and he still has shows to catch. Then he turns to Gerald Walker, who just stares right back at him. With a simple wave, Superhuman Yaup asks for a fee to teach him. Gerald Walker promises to pay, but only if a certain condition is met. Superhuman Yaup asks him what would happen if that condition were true. He then shouts for a fresh fight in the big official match happening in just 2 weeks. Superhuman Yaup turned down the deal, saying he cared about neither fighting nor gold. Gerald Walker grabs him, promising to give him whatever he wants to join in, but he just tells him to get out. The warrior steps forward and promises that things will change next time. He insists Superhuman Yaup can't waste his power, but Superhuman Yaup just says the choice is his own. 2 opponents lock eyes in the middle of the arena, neither ready to back down. The team in the control room just watches as the argument gets more and more tense. Park Gentai watches the whole scene without saying a word. He smiles and plans to use this chance to his benefit, while over at the TV, a woman watches a drama with her full attention. While Superhuman Yaup lies on the couch watching the show and wondering what will happen to the characters, the broadcast suddenly cuts off to break urgent news. He sits up, grumbling that the interruption happened right at the best part. The anchor said Superhuman Yaup won't be in Battlefield, but a chat with Gerald Walker might have changed his mind. He listens with a puzzled look as the reporter tells him about an anonymous tip that sent a video of the showdown. The American team's health is now known, and if they win 11-0 against Korea, Yap must join them for a friendly match. The anchor says that Yop has already agreed to the deal. Surprised, he jumped up and asked when he ever agreed to such a deal. The president's office door at the Korean Battlefields Association headquarters suddenly flew open. A man walked in, wondering exactly what was going on. He walked up to Park Gintae's desk while another man held him back, demanding to know who sent the anonymous tip and promising to kill them with his own hands. He then played a video on his phone to show that they had cut out the part where he said no to their offer. As the man vowed to find the person who leaked the video, the president stood up from his chair. Park Gintae bowed low and apologized to Seo Yap for what had happened. He said he couldn't say no to the American Association because of his close friendship with Walker and the heavy pressure from the news. Seo seemed to get what was happening, but he still hesitated before answering. Then Park Gintae put a hand on his shoulder and said there was nothing to fear. He showed he'd made a plan to keep things easy for himself by setting a rule before joining in. The deal was that if the Americans won with no one dying, Seo Yap would play a friendly match, and he promised there was no fear since the Korean team wasn't the best. Seo Yap erupted in anger, declaring he had no desire for the battlefield, and demanding to know why they wouldn't leave him alone. But the president said the goal was so hard to reach that everyone finally agreed it was the only way. Park Gintae yanked Seo Yap by his collar, pleading their friendship and asking for a big favor. He then promised that all the money earned would go to Yap's favorite kids' charity, asking him to give it a try. Yap felt annoyed by what was happening, but he also thought about their long friendship. He grudgingly agreed, but added that this was his only time, which made Park Gintae very happy. The president leaned in to kiss him in thanks, but Yap pushed him away, saying it was all good. Then he made it clear that he wouldn't play if any American players lost their lives. Park Gintae nodded with a smile and promised he'd keep his promise. Once everything was sorted out, the president invited them to dinner and said he'd pay for the meal. He walked them out of the room and told them he knew a great spot for tuna sashimi. As he walked away, Park Gintae turned back with a serious look, showing that he meant to keep his word. Sitting at his desk, he opened a document showing that Korea lost every set in the match simulation and offered a preemptive apology. The news anchor reported that the Korean group said Seo Yap had accepted the American team's offer. On another channel, a host said that Seo Yap might join the fight. Breaking news just dropped that Seo Yap is stepping into the Rank A match. Back at home, Seo Yap kept watching the endless news about himself while grumbling that his show wasn't airing because of it. Friend, Abisme got furious when his favorite show disappeared to make way for the news, which was all about. He walked to the window and sighed at his terrible luck. Suddenly a sound from outside grabbed his attention. He leaned forward to peek at the action in the training area. Someone zoomed right past the cone like a rocket. A woman moved quickly while a man watched over her. Seo Yap watched the scene. He tossed the ball over to her. She caught the flying object with her weapon right before it could hit the ground. Then he noticed that Hyeon was practicing. Her dad, Big J, gave her a thumbs up for her quick reflexes but told her she needed to speed up to keep her teammates in the game. As Seo Yap stepped closer, she pointed out that Jay was picking on her once again. He switched on his glowing scanner eyes. Big Hyeon's analysis showed off her skills, proving she could teleport and swing on ropes. And Yap's study showed that Hyeon's agility was already at its absolute limit. He realized that while she had incredible stamina and strength that surpassed her father's peak, her overall potential was lower than his, meaning she would never reach the heights he dreamed of, so his tough training style just wouldn't work for her. On the grass, Hyeon felt completely worn out and begged for a quick rest. She turned and was shocked to see Seo Yap staring at her, noting that at this pace she couldn't even kill a single American team member. Hyeon asked if he'd spotted her train, and Seo Yap simply replied that he didn't think she needed to practice her agility anymore. But Baek Jae disagreed, saying she still needed to work a bit more, but with extra practice she'd get there. Then Seo Yap turned to him and said that Hyeon was not like him. He told him to quit the agility and speed drills because her limits for those skills were lower than his. He insisted that her quickness and skill with the whip were already at their best. Yap said that even though she could move fast, she wasn't the same as her dad. He then turned to Hyeon, who gazed at him with curious eyes. He asked if she'd just pull an opponent off balance or throw them to her teammates after snaring them with her whip, but Seo Yap scolded her for being wrong and insisted she must finish the fight herself because relying only on her father's style left her with no one to clean up the mess. He handed her the whip and sword, promising to show her it wasn't hard if he taught her how to use them. Then he walked up to the training dummy. In one smooth move, he swung the whip around and caught the target. He said that once you trap your enemy, you must rush forward before they can escape. In a split second, he swung his sword and cut the dummy right in half. He turned to Hyeon and her father to ask if they got it. They both stayed quiet, watching everything that happened. He told her the whip alone couldn't kill anyone, so she needed strength and sword skills, which made Seo Yap switch to close-up fighting and ask if the trainer got it. He proposed they begin with 500 strength exercises, leaving Hyeon and her father completely stunned. He stood tall and commanded them to start the 500 strength exercises right away. He told them they had just 14 days left before the big A-rank match. At the U.S. national team hotel, a man named John Kim gave a big compliment to Gerald Walker, noting how much he had improved in just a few days. Walker wondered if the gap was truly that wide, and his agent gave him the thumbs up. John Kim called Walker's quick switch of shields after meeting Samanya foolish, but admitted that watching him over the last few days showed he had found a way to overcome his weakness and reach the top 3, though the agent warned that adjusting to face fast opponents like Nathan would be difficult even if it would help him in the long run. Then Walker asked just how much money he would get for his improvement. John Kim knew he could walk away with at least $10 million if he changed his style to match the team's new direction. The number 10 million rang like a bell in Walker's head. He saw a news report about Sum Up on TV and instantly ordered them to send him $10 million right away. His agent was stunned until Walker clarified that the money was just for consulting. He reached out his hand and said he'd drag him onto the battlefield regardless. He ran a hand along the wall, telling Semenop to wait just a moment more. Match kicked off at the Seoul International Battle Stadium, and finally, the big day had come for the historic Rank A showdown between Korea and the USA. 2 commentators started the show, sharing the crowd's nervous worry about what would happen next. One of them said that today would decide the dream showdown between Sam Yop and America. Next, he showed off the entire Korean team that was ready to fight in the arena. The camera then showed everyone on the United States team. Baekhyun stepped onto the arena as the Korean team's sharpshooting ace, ready to strike with every move. On the other side, Gerald Walker was the tough and brilliant star of the American team. Chiop sat in the stands as the announcer praised Hyeon's big debut in her new role. The camera zoomed in on Sumin Yop's face. It was announced that the fight would take place in an ancient castle guarded by skeletons. And the very first boss the player faced was a skeleton warrior. On the second floor you'd face a Death Knight, but on the very last floor you'd meet Dragon Vaughn and the Lich. For the new fans, the voice on the radio made sure they knew the most important rules of the game. Then the Korean players stepped into the arena. When the American team walked in, the commentator couldn't stop guessing who would win. The announcer shouted that the first game was about to start. Both teams sprinted right into the dungeon. The American team ran straight into a crowd of skeletons. Walker stood his ground as the monsters drew near. They moved in perfect rhythm together, and Walker took out the first skeleton. The commentator noted that while the American team moved slowly, they always built a wall so strong no one could break through after their hunt. Han held her weapon tight, ready to spring into action. While he talked about the American team, the Korean team zoomed forward at high speed. Right then, one of the commentators let out a gasp, clearly surprised by what they were seeing. Korean team moved past the skeletons without striking them. They just kept running, paying no mind to the monsters lurking in the next area. Baek Jae watched his team sprinting ahead, sure they just had to keep moving. He thought that if the plan worked, they might just get a shot at winning. The announcer said that Korea, which usually takes its time, was now charging straight at the boss with a bold new plan. The danger was huge, but winning would mean they'd get a ton of hunting points. If we beat the boss, the first floor will slam shut in just a few minutes and mess up the American team's plans. Right now, the Korean team's icon finally made it to the bosses. The Korean team faced their first big challenge, a skeleton warrior guarding the first floor. Ain and Baekju got ready to fight. One American player asked Walker to wait because something strange had just happened. Walker asked Paulward if the scouting was done just as the Korean team stood before the boss. He then wondered what this sudden surprise was all about. The player said the Korean team was hunting the first floor boss, but after a teammate urged them to rush up before it closed, Walker chose to call off the hunt and go straight to the boss area instead. He glanced at his female teammate and explained that since he couldn't move fast, he'd have to borrow her speed. The Korean team was ready to beat the skeleton warrior. They moved forward, convinced Hyeon would be the one to end the fight. The leader told everyone to stay put and shield her as she leaped, but something hurtled toward her at breakneck speed. She had no time to react before Walker struck her hard and knocked her backward, leaving her wondering where he had come from. The Korean team stared in shock when Walker suddenly showed up. Baekhyun knew he had cheated by stealing a teammate's power to fly through the air and get there in a flash. The impact slammed her into the dungeon wall just as Khan's death triggered a notification. Walker admitted that sticking to the boss was a solid move, but he insisted that even if the plan worked, the end result would stay the same. The rest of the American team showed up right after the skeleton warrior. Then they launched a fierce attack on the boss, who was now worn out and struggling to hold them off. A message popped up saying the boss on the first floor was beaten and the place would shut down in 10 minutes. Walker realized it was time to call it a day. The American players pushed forward to take down the last members of the Korean team. The commentator said that right after they showed up, the American team knocked out their rivals in an instant. The Korean squad was wiped out after failing the final battle. After Walker got ready to strike the final blow. The final Korean player was lying on the ground too frozen to move. He then put down his final foe. The scoreboard flashed that the American team had crushed the first set, winning 11-0. Theon walked down the corridor, convinced he had seen it all happen again. She halted before the door, wishing she hadn't lost. She peeked through the door, heart heavy because she got no chance to fight, even with her uncle standing by her side. The man stopped the crowd, wanting all eyes on him because he had something to say. Heian stared at him in shock as things began to unfold. Samuna warned that the match was so thrilling his eyes nearly popped out, so they had better listen to his advice. When a player tried to say their coach was Baek Jae, he was told to shut up. Yap then explained that he was doing this because, at this rate, he'd end up having to compete against the very team he was meant to join. He kept talking about how the team tried their winning play but couldn't pull it off because they simply weren't skilled enough and were way outmatched. He said they stood no chance of winning, but since quitting would be a disgrace, he promised to teach them how to at least take down Walker. Dummon started by saying that Martha Bourne's palace was once a dark dungeon he and the association director used to hunt down when they were young. He said attacking wasn't hard, but those bones on the third level made things annoying. But given how tough the team played, it would be a miracle if they made it that far, so he asked them to focus on the game they had just lost. He added that the plan they used in the first set wasn't bad at all. That means, of course, only if they could finish the job. He pointed at the players and started talking about their frontline spots. He scolded the team for rushing into the boss's room without checking where the enemy was hiding first. The rear guard should have protected us the moment the front line fell, but everyone froze when Walker killed Heian. The reason they kept losing 11-0 was that they hadn't even mastered the basics. He shook his head in disbelief at their status as the national team, felt sorry for Jope, and then turned to say there was nothing more to add about the first set. He cut right to the chase and promised to share his plan for the second set. The second round kicked off and the Americans sprinted onto the field, instantly splitting into two groups. They'd line up in a 6-5 formation so the fastest group could claim the hunting grounds first. Walker took charge of the second group, keeping his eyes locked on the hunt. The plan was built around the team's best players. The crowd gasped in surprise as the Korean team made their move. The commentator said Baek Hae-an vanished suddenly and then came back. Next, the whole Korean team ran through the dungeon all over again. The commentators were surprised to see Heian switch his position since Korea was known for playing defense. Saemin Yop watched with a smile and said they were doing well. He kept his eyes fixed on them, knowing the whole plan hung in the balance until they followed his orders perfectly. Only then did they find a way through. Heian stepped forward determined to make sure they win this time. One of the American Vanguard players halted at a street corner to get a quick look around. He told Walker that he couldn't spot the Korean team anywhere nearby. He figured that since there was only one way through the dungeon, the Korean team must be saving their strength for the second half. And Walker knew for sure that the disaster in the first set had forced them to change their entire plan. He stood his ground, knowing that Soman Yop would soon be stepping into the arena. Something broke on the cave wall right behind Walker. He spun around in shock, wondering what made the sound, right before a huge boom tore through the dungeon wall. The whole Korean team burst out from the wreckage as it flew toward them. As soon as they touched down, they swarmed around the American team. The American team was shocked, and Walker couldn't figure out how they managed to get there. In a flashback, Suman Yap told the scouts to lead the way, with Han darting ahead first to scout out their enemy. He kept talking, warning them not to kill any monsters or bosses if Walker's group had fewer than 5 players, which left the team totally shocked. He told them that while everyone knew Martha Bourne's palace had a one-way path, he had found a secret teleportation point perfect for ambushes and ordered Heian to use it. Eamon Yaup claimed he knew how to find the hidden entrance that looked just like any other wall, and once they went through it, they could sneak up on the American team without being seen. He commanded all 11 of them to sprint down that path and attack the American team that had broken apart to hunt. In the present day, the Korean team stepped out from the blast. Then they swooped in from behind and charged at the American team. Heian touched down right in front of an American player, and Semin Yop's orders were crystal clear. When you fight Walker, the team should go for his legs. Looking back, Heian asked about the strategy, but Yop explained that his legs felt weak in the current conditions, and switching to a smaller shield only left him more exposed since he wasn't used to it yet. The American team faces a tough fight with no allowed casualties, a tricky ambush, and an Esper right there to deal with. Xiaomaman Yop told them to trust him and follow his orders. Back in the present, Heian thanked her uncle for helping her out. The Korean team surged forward before the Americans could get their formation together, and Heian gained power from that team's support. One of her teammates poured their power straight into her. She moved closer to Walker, but he held his ground, knocked out 2 Korean players, and stopped her advance. Then he finally saw that she had vanished from him by teleporting away. She slipped up behind the American team, who were actually the ones she really meant to hurt. A message popped up saying Baek Hae-on had taken out 2 opponents. Walker saw that the real danger wasn't in front, but hiding right behind him. He then charged in and took down another Korean player. After winning his third elimination, Walker ordered the Vanguard to turn back right away. With the Vanguard coming back later, the game was now down to 3 Americans fighting against 8 Koreans. Walker said such a team was easy to beat, so he swung his axe and struck. He spun around and took down another opponent, landing his 4th kill. Han sprinted toward him from behind, but when he turned, he was surprised to see no one there. Then she popped up from underneath and hit his leg. He spun wildly from the hit, and Han slipped to the side. Walker sank to the ground, his knees hitting the dirt. The American team was doing great until one player suddenly got hit by a nasty surprise attack. The Korean team relied on having more players, giving up 7 of them to knock out 3 members of the American team. A Korean player walked up to Walker, who was lying on the ground. Walker wondered if Seom Yap had trained her, and seeing her fighting style change so suddenly, she raised her sword and pointed it right at him. He stared her down, admitting it was pretty amazing. The crowd cheered wildly when the scoreboard proved the Korean team had knocked out 5 American players in a stunning comeback. Big stood quiet, stunned by what had just happened. Superhuman Yap leaned back in his chair, asked if the other man had seen what just happened, and promised to help him find Walker. The commentators cheer wildly as the Korean team pulls off a stunning surprise victory. Unfortunately, the game ended with the Americans winning 2-0. One person wished the Korean team hadn't met the returning Americans because the game might have been more fun. Walker stared at the scoreboard, thinking hard about how the Korean team played. He takes a quick look at the results from the second round. Even though the Korean team played against a tough American squad, they managed to knock out 5 opponents. The commentators all agreed that the real highlight of the match was the Korean team's amazing comeback, which happened after they broke through the wall, and it was all thanks to one special player who made that huge comeback possible. It was the reason her team lost 4 out of 5 rounds. The crowd roars with excitement as they cheer for the Korean team's ace, Baek Haein. She asks him what he thinks about the game, pointing out that the national team looked completely different from their usual selves. He says that even though they lost, the lesson they learned will push the team to do better next time. The reporter asked him how he came up with the clever trick of using the secret tunnel in the second area. Akshu nodded, admitting it was a brilliant move because everyone knew the dungeon had only one way through. He glances away, showing the truth. The team got a hand figuring out their plan for the second set. Nan Yap watches the interview from a distance. He complains about Baek Yahao's tries to talk him around. He notices the coach is still trying to talk him into joining in. Baek Yahaon takes a deep breath and walks right up to her interview. The reporter calls her the most powerful player on the field and wonders what kind of hard work she puts in to get so strong. She says her uncle has been teaching her hard and even suggested she switch jobs. Superhuman Yaup watches the scene, sighs in frustration over the father and daughter talking about him, but decides it doesn't matter since it's the truth. Park Gintai walks up to him, still bristling with annoyance whenever he feels embarrassed. Superhuman Yaup points toward the interview spot, wondering why the association president hasn't shown up yet. Park Genta says it's best to let others take care of things, while Sum Yaup asks what he wants now. Park Genta says he came back for nostalgia, knowing that Secret Passage was a hidden place shared by only a few, including them both. Sum Yaup confessed that while he came up with the second plan, he felt it was a bit too sneaky to sneak through a secret tunnel during a game. He said he trusted his own method better than a guerrilla attack to avoid being forced to play. The president says he heard about Sum Yup's training with Han and her discovery of her talent, but Seup just shrugs and says it's nothing new. He stood there saying it was wonderful to see one of his plans work out after all this time, and that his special skill was just too valuable to waste. Sum Yup agrees, admitting that he is truly incredible. Park Ginti then asks what he thinks about putting that talent to better use. Sum Yup doubts he needs to talk since he already won the bet, but the president makes one last promise. If Yup says no, he'll never bother him again. He lets us know that the big Korean Pro League season is starting very soon. Sum Yup asks if he'd like him to play as a pro. Park Jin-tae shakes his head and says he would never ask for something so unfair. He says he's planning a charity game with famous players before the league begins and would love for Semin Yo to join in. He thought Simon Yaup would say no to the offer, but Sum Yaup surprised Park Gent by saying he needed some time to think about it. Park Gintente is caught off guard by Seoman Yaup, who stubbornly says no to anything he doesn't want to do. But in the end, he decides it's not a big deal. Suman Yop says that watching Hyun play sparked his curiosity, even though he knows TV shows are fun but nothing like the real thing. With dungeons gone, this is his only place left to fight. Park Jin-tae grins, ruffles his hair and says, "That's the spirit," as he points out on his phone that the Rank A match clip already has over 10 million views in just 1 hour. The video, with over 11 million views, is flooded with praise for the Korean team, Haeun and Semin Yop, but Semin Yop gets annoyed and tells him to calm down. As he steps back to praise the president's strength, the leader apologizes for his excitement, only for Seomomin Yap to correct him by noting that his participation hasn't been confirmed yet. Park Jin-tae cheered up, saying it was amazing he was even thinking about the idea. Yap wonders if the professional league is finally about to kick off. He feels uneasy about holding the charity match right before the league starts, and Park Gentin knows he's onto the plan. Semin Yap then says that if he's to play in the charity match, he has some conditions to set first. Park Ginti holds his ground, waiting to hear what he wants. The association president tells Semin Yap that if he agrees to play in the charity match, he can ask for anything at all. Semin Yap beams with a bright smile and happily agrees to the offer. Back in the training area, Baekju walks up with his sword ready. He walks over to Semin Yap, who is waiting with a spear resting on his shoulders. He asks what's going on, and Semin Yap replies that since the president agreed to his terms, they are playing the charity match. He kept saying he'd been given another shot at life and planned to spend it glued to the TV. Baekyaho moves toward him, though he's decided to take a moment to get ready just in case. While Sumyop scolded the national team for their training, Baekyaho stepped in to apologize for doing such a poor job teaching them. The coach wonders why he's being pulled into this, even though it's awesome that Sumyap wants to play again. But Sumyap replies that he can't be the only one to suffer, especially since Hyeon is the only other good player left. He tells Baekyaho to give him some space because it's been 17 years since he last stepped into the ring. Sumop calms him down and promises to help him get back in shape through training. Baekyaho grumbles and listens to his friend's sure words. The Seop flicks on his scanner eyes to read Baekyaho's stats. He realizes that even though he is weaker from not training, he can easily start getting his power back again. Sumop grins and warns that starting tomorrow, he's going to put him through hell. There, Baekjae sees that he's going to fail. In a memory, Seoma Min Yaop tells Park Jintae two things: play with Han and let Baekjae in too. The president figures that if they team up with two of the original 7 heroes, they'll easily find plenty of sponsors. He quickly makes a call to ask for a favor. Word travels fast that Min Yaop, BKJ, and BK Han are joining the charity game, and everyone starts counting down the days until the big event. Yaup explained that his tricky trick needed him to be just a hair faster than his rival. His trainer yelled at him for acting that way even after remembering the lesson, but Yaup just promised to try and get faster. Being ready, his trainer was about to strike. Next, he stepped toward Salman Yaup with his sword ready. Yaup leaped back just in time to avoid the hit. Then he stood firm and used his shield to stop the attack. After the training, he asked Salman Yaup how it went, and Salman Yaup replied that he felt great this time. His trainer noted that 17 years had gone by and asked for a rest. He stretched out, grumbled about being tired, and noted that training again at his age was really hard. So, Yoap claimed it was just a warm-up and told him to stop complaining, but the man argued they had been training for 8 hours. The older man shrugged and said he didn't care, telling Yaup that he wasn't the same as before and needed to rest while he watched his show. Uman Yaup told him he had an appointment and couldn't watch the show. They headed toward the huge Korean Battlefield Association building. There, Yu Hyunu, the tech team leader, welcomed them and confirmed that Seomin Yeop had arrived for the avatar test. Yu Hyunu brought in Mr. Brown Tenor from the World Battlefield Association to run today's tests. Before things started, Semin Yeop stepped up to ask a question. He wondered why they needed to run more tests. Hyunu said he skipped the athletic test and went straight to making his avatar. To make sure the avatar worked perfectly, they had to gather all the details about his body and strength first. Semin Yeop was amazed at how exact the technology was. Hyunu confirmed that the system had scanned every part of the player's body and built that exact copy inside the avatar. He mentioned that the tech might even bring out Esper powers the user hasn't found yet, which Yeop thought was really cool. Then Hyunu dropped a bombshell, saying the battlefield system held deep secrets and was built from the special power of one particular person. Yeop felt something was off and accused them of faking their identities as the buyers. He then wondered if the bearers were behind the World Battlefield Association, but Yu Hyunu said no. Sean Yab said that if true, he wanted them to appear right then, which made the hesitant Hyunu hurry them along to get measured. In the fresh new room, Hyunu shouted that they'd start by testing his strength, agility, and aura, telling him to go all out so the numbers would be perfect and his connection to his avatar would be flawless. The first test checked how strong you were, so Sum Yaup walked right up to the machine. The test started the moment he pulled the lever and kept it there. Summon Yap yanked the lever with every ounce of strength he had. The lever slid right out of his grip, and the machine began reading the data. The screen flashed with 8113, telling him to give it another shot. After 2 more tries, the numbers came out different, ranging from 8 out of 19 all the way to 817. He looked at his numbers and marked down a score of 79 for strength. While Yope wondered what challenge came next, Yuhunu noted that his power was just average for someone called a hero. Next, he had to quickly switch between 2 wall buttons until the alarm finally sounded. Sum Yap got everything ready and said yes to starting the challenge. And as soon as the test started, he locked his eyes on the paper and gave everything he had. Yup darted back and forth, slamming the switches down. The watchers were shocked as Hunu asked how a huge tanker could move so fast. The measurement was done, so he paused right in the center of the room. Money Yaup asked for his score and was shocked to find he had gotten 963. He said that with a little extra push, he could beat 970, so he decided to try again. Once the second try was over, the scoreboard flashed a fresh score of 971. The crowd was stunned when they realized he had somehow climbed past 9. Man Yaup asked what the highest score was, and Hunsu revealed that someone had reached 107, which made Yaup wonder if it was Nathan Bernard. He told me he knew Beck Ju because Beck had sent him videos right before he agreed to play in the charity match. Yaup noted that Nathan was so quick he could match his peak self, which was rare since few people have 100 agility points. With a quick snap of his fingers, he decided to try one more time, stepping into the center of the room with his eyes set on a perfect score of 975. Then he locked his eyes on the next try. For some reason, on that specific day, he felt like he was in perfect shape for the test. Then the test started, and his eyes lit up. He slapped the first switch on the wall. Next, he zoomed from one target to the next at lightning speed. The crowd watched in awe as he moved faster than ever before. He stopped dead in his tracks right after finishing the measurement. His chest heaved with heavy breaths once the test was finally over. As the crowd argued over the score, Yu Hunsu couldn't understand how it happened. Catching his breath, Si Yap asked how he did, thinking he must have been faster this time. The panel flashed 107, tying Nathan's record and proving he was the fastest Esper in the world. He then wondered how he managed to hit that same score, since his agility was 97, which was a bit lower than Nathan and Joe ever were at their best. Yap suddenly felt he had pushed himself too far beyond his limits right then. Then he asked for one more test of his strength to make sure everything was exactly as he hoped. Using the same method as before, he focused on starting as soon as he was ready. He yanked the lever with every ounce of strength he had left. The watchers gasped in surprise when his score went up. When he asked for his score, he discovered he had gotten 890, which was way better than before, and when asked if he was finally warmed up, he said he was just more focused. He stared at his own hand, wondering if the power he just showed was finally stronger than what he thought he could do. But he quickly shook off the thought, because his scanner eyes showed no difference in his power, even though something felt strange. He knew that feeling right away. It all started with a memory from the past. He remembered feeling this same clarity back in the last dungeon when he fought alone, knowing that staring down death sharpened his mind like nothing else. His mind grew so sharp it pushed past what normal people can do, proving that such intense focus truly supercharges all his other powers. But he regretted having no battle left to fight, wasting his strength and endless life on nothing but empty focus. It felt like he was being shoved right back onto the battlefield. Finally, they started the aura test, and he was told to stare at the marble sphere right in front of him. He set his hands on the object and realized it was a curious tool, even though like before, they could only sense the aura of weapons. Yuhunu explained that since aura power mostly comes from your natural talent, this is what they look at most when judging rising stars. Yap remembered that after his scanner eyes opened, his aura stood at 96, and he had tried every trick in the book to fill those last 4 missing points. He placed his hand over the glowing sphere. The watchers were stunned as they wondered just how much higher his aura would soar. With his power at full strength, he pushed all his energy into the object. That was the peak a human could ever climb. As soon as the reading was done, the sphere shifted color. The brown tenor stared in shock at what he just saw. The big screen showed a total of 130 points. Xiaomoman Yap leaned in to ask for the result, while Hyunu stammered, telling him he had just broken every human record. The crowd gasped in shock as he broke the record for the strongest human ever. With a bright smile, Soman Yaup gives a thumbs up and asks who they think he is. Yuhunu tells him the old record was held by Sulan, one of his 7 heroic friends, leaving Yaup shocked. Yuhunu admitted he never expected the record to fall, though he couldn't deny the girl had an incredible aura. He remembers that even though Chulan's mind was weak, her confidence was so huge that they fought all the time. The test ends, but Hyunu adds one last thing to tell them, and Suman Yaup immediately asks what it is. Because using his immortality trick would just guarantee a win, he refused to use it in the games he had already seen coming. The group offered an apology and money for the unfairness, but he said he doesn't care about the limits, accepts the cash and reveals he no longer needs his immortality. Over in another place, a leader shouts to a huge crowd, telling them that this person will save them. He then declares that the proof they've been waiting for has finally arrived. The leader holds up a piece of paper and asks everyone to think about the person inside. The newspaper hails Sumo as a savior, claiming he has won immortality. The crowd roars Sumo's name in pure joy, ready to show they believe in him. As he walks out of the building, he finds a huge crowd of people wearing hoods waiting for him.
Man spun around to ask who those people were.
The crowd shouts his name in unison, cheering for him as their savior and the hero who will save the world. His friend tells him that they belong to a fake religion called the Superhuman Foundation, which worships him like a god. Yop whispers the foundation's name over and over, desperate to remember what it means. He recalls spotting them outside the hospital, and his friend nods in agreement. The man says they think the world will end again and that Yap will come back to save the chosen ones. Yap calls them crazy, but his companion admits he thought so too until Yap actually came back to life. Now they wander around pretending to be happy, waiting for the world to end. He wants to teach those lunatics a lesson, but his friend stops him and tells him to just leave them alone. Yap turns his back on him and keeps walking. He jumps up and lands on a high wall above the crowd. He commands silence with a loud authoritative shout. But the crowd keeps screaming for a savior, so he shouts back, asking if they are actually deaf. Finally, the quiet returns, and he notes that they are still. He speaks to the crowd, telling them he knows exactly what they feel about him, which makes them shout for him to be their savior once more. The clown points at the crowd, screaming for them to drop their crazy nonsense and vanish. Hooded followers gasp in surprise when he speaks. He then asks if they aren't working, demands to know who runs the foundation, and threatens that leader. The crowd started whispering that the savior was pushing them away just to see if their faith was strong enough. They all joined hands to show their faith, leaving Seaman Yap in a total mess. Everyone begins shouting Seaman Yap's name together, their voices rising as one. He is confused and doesn't understand why these people keep shouting at him. His friend watches what's happening and sees that things are getting serious. So then he gives them 10 seconds to get out before he attacks them. He plunges into the screaming crowd as his friend yells for him to stop. Many Foundation members lie knocked out on the ground. He sat atop a pile of bodies, holding a boy and asking if he'd keep following, but the boy cried no. The Yap tells him to leave those people alone, but warns him to be extra careful when going down. He leaps off the pile of bodies, shouting that he's done sorting them out and they can get back to training. His companion calls out to him, and Seaman Yap turns around to ask what they need. The man calls Seaman Yap the craziest person he's ever met, but Yap just laughs and points to his own followers as the real madmen. Worried that the reporters might return, his friend urges them to go inside, but Yop insists that if they do come back, he will simply beat them up and kick them out. The elder warns that this will only draw more crowds, but Yop reveals that's exactly how he once got rid of the stalkers who wanted to know about his orphanage days. As a follower soars above the city, he wonders if he is truly the savior. Yap grumbles about why everyone cares so much about other people's lives, and his friend nods in agreement. Right then, he stops dead, and his friend asks what's wrong. A strange energy glows from a faraway building, but Seaman Yap shrugs it off, and the story jumps ahead to the charity match at Incheon International Airport. When Joe Fellman, the American field agent, arrives, everyone starts shouting that big important people are coming to watch Seaman Yap's fight. Fellman notes that it's been 15 years since his last stop, and he explains that the American field team only became the top one because they hired so many Korean espers. His assistant mourns losing Mr. Beck, a true diamond, while Fellman reveals that the 7 heroes once refused to even consider stepping onto the battlefield. She keeps telling how young Zulan showed some interest but stopped when her special power got weaker. But Ben remembers that the footage of Julan's avatar test was shocking, revealing that her extinction ray at full power could end an 11-on-11 match in just 3 seconds. He squeezes his fist tight and shouts that since this is his shot to find the world's most powerful Esper, he absolutely won't let the chance to bring Seaman Yap onto his team slip away. His assistant steps in, waving him over to a crowd of reporters coming toward them. Joe Fellman looked up just as a man walked toward him. Jake Rand, the European field agent, walks onto the airport tarmac where he is instantly spotted by Joe Fellman, who steps forward to welcome him. He urges them to fight fairly and honestly this time, but Fellman knows it won't be easy. While cameras flash, the tension thickens as Fellman stands his ground to protect his hard-won prize from being stolen. Out in another part of town, 2 men watch the whole thing unfold. One says the man who burned down their dungeon is now heading out to the battlefield. The Morrow brothers, who run the Paris Lumiere Battlefield Club, realize they can't just let Seaman Yap slide. They cheerfully shout that they'll make him sign with them no matter what it takes. 3 groups now stand face to face in the airport lobby. They traded looks, showing they wouldn't give an inch. But be careful. A heavy tension hangs between them as they vow that no one else will ever take Seaman Yap away. High heels clack loudly across the airport floor, freezing everyone in their tracks. A walking weapon of war steps onto the scene, making the whole continent feel like it just became untouchable. The youngest of the 7 heroes, Suan, steps forward to tell everyone she's here to find a boy she knows. Under the bright fireworks, a huge crowd packs the event spot so tight that someone remarks on how full it has gotten. Inside the arena, one spectator wishes the war had wiped out more people, only to get scolded by another. A limousine pulls up to the red carpet, and the man who doesn't care tells everyone he'll think about it before stepping out, even though they've warned him to be careful for this big day. Seaman Yap steps out of his limo and walks down the red carpet. He grins and says, "It's time to have some fun." As the crowd cheers, Back Jay wonders why they're so excited about a guy like him. Seaman Yap says he looks good only because Joe worked so hard to get him ready. Reporters swarm forward asking to talk to Mr. Seaman Yap, so Mr. Baek Jubayak pushes him toward the crowd and warns him not to say anything weird. Surrounded and fuming at being used as bait, he snaps back at the reporter for asking about the attack on the Seaman Foundation followers. Questions kept rolling about the fights he started, how the game made him feel, and the surprise of Shulan finally showing up after 17 long years. He can't believe he just heard Shulan's name, especially since the reporter just told him she flew into Korea today to watch the charity game. Yap questions why she is there, and the man explains that she has come to find a boy she knows who is playing in the match. He suddenly understands that when she says boy, she might actually be talking about him. He knocks on the wall as he steps into the hallway. As he walks, other competitors stop to marvel at the real statue and guess how talented he must be. And as he walks up to Byakshud, he asks if he heard the news. Junop tells him that Julin is in Korea, and Bak Yahoo remarks that it has finally come to pass. His friend tells him to stay safe and keep a shield close at all times. He recalls once being rude to her, but Yahoo corrects him by saying he used to curse at her until she started crying. Siyap isn't sure if she'll hunt him down now, but she's wondering if she might zap him with her extinction ray, while Yahoo back there is confused about whether they've really lost all memory of their past. Joe then reminds him that he is the very same guy who used to annoy her before. The memory throws him back 17 years, to the days when the Chinese Esper Sholan was one of 7 heroes chosen to fight in the final dungeon. As the only daughter of rich and powerful parents, she lived under the watchful eye of the government. The 17-year-old girl grew up living like royalty. Suparhuman Yop despised nothing more than people who threw a tantrum just because they couldn't get better. That's why some Yop wouldn't stop bothering her, warning her to think before she acts and wondering if her brain was just for show. He called her slow and poked her, asking why she didn't use her powers when he told her to. Yap laughed and said a headless chicken would be better than her, so she decided at least to use her special powers properly. The little girl shook in fear while she looked at him. Back in the present, Baek Yahoo and his friend shake their heads in disbelief, admitting they'll probably have to hold a second funeral for him. Baek Ju puts that off for later since they have something much more important to handle right now. Then he looks at the whole group and asks everyone to listen closely. He starts to lay out the plan for the charity match, acting like everyone already knows the rules. With a fresh challenger stepping onto the field, Bach KKA rushes to explain the game rules. The charity match kicks off with the Love team taking on the Hope team. While Team Love picks its players from the nation, Team Hope invites special guests, except for Bayak Hyan, and puts Bayak Hao in charge as their national coach. Here, Baek Jae admits he's a bit nervous because it's been a while since he held a weapon, but he hopes they will take good care of him. The captain of Team Hope, Park Chulo, promised him they would try their very best. Seoman Yop notices that even after a while, Yahoo is probably 1,000 times stronger than them. He looked at the stats for Baek Yahoo and Baek Haeun and realized that with those specs, all 3 would make it through just fine. But the rest of the team isn't much to talk about. Then his eyes lock onto one of the players. While the player begs the coach to watch over them, he studies Cho Huk's numbers. His special powers let him quickly gather aura into a weapon and make his body incredibly tough. He is strongest when he can lift something as heavy as 90. He decides the player could make a solid tanker and pulls him aside for a quick talk. Choi Hook steps forward and tells everyone exactly who he is, a man who works right up close. Kim Yaob wonders if he really heard that right, and the young man, beaming with pride, admits he is a proximity dealer for Sangsung Spritz. He explains that he dreamed of being a tanker like Mr. Seoman Yop, but his small size forced him to become a dealer instead. When asked about his special power, Cho Hyuk admits he can only channel his aura into weapons to attack, and that's all he can do.
Suman traded goods because he hadn't yet unlocked his super tough skin.
In a memory from the past, a coach told the tiny and speedy Cho Hyuk that he was too small and fast to ever be a tanker. Then the man calls him a dealer. Back in the present, Seoman Yop asks Hyan for a shield, so she dashes off to grab it. He then passes a big pot lid to Choi Hook. With no time to waste, Seoman Yap starts teaching him the basics, telling him to hold the shield tight against his chest while he practices moving forward and back to strike. The young man argues that he's a dealer, but Yap just stares him down and asks if he's talking back. The other players watched in shock as he moved a teammate he had only just met. Cho Hook looks to Baek Jae for help, but the coach just stays quiet. Baek Ju turns away from him and shouts out the new team: 4 tankers, 6 dealers, and 1 support. Cho Hook sinks into despair as he realizes the coach has left him behind, just as Jae shouts that it's time to get ready. Gin Yap was amazed that the armor was so light, and BJ nodded, confirming it was just as tough as old war armor before asking if it felt comfortable. Big J asks if he's okay, and Semin Yap admits he feels strange because he has never really imagined wearing that uniform. Jo gently tells him that the weapons are just a bit tweaked from the originals, so there's nothing to worry about. Yap looks over his shield to check if it is ready for battle. He admires how the spears work, and Bak Yahoo adds that they put special thought into their design. Bak Jo insists those historical weapons save the world, but Somi Yap cuts him off, reminding him that Bak Jo himself made them less than a year ago. The coach warns him not to let his guard down, reminding him that even though he's strong, he still has to fight those scary monsters and bearers. Those players were trained to fight humans and had far more experience in the game than them. With a smile, Superhuman Battlefield says he'll remember that coach Bike, then gives a thumbs up, eager to watch the experienced player show off their skills. The people in the stands go absolutely crazy. The scoreboard declares the big showdown between Team Hope and Team Love. As the teams line up, one player notices that up close, the national team looks completely different. Sumop points out that while the other team looks better on paper, they actually feel flat and don't have any special tricks up their sleeves. He questions Baekjae about their recruiting scoring system, and the coach confirms they use a final tally that considers many different categories. My teammate explained that since the score comes from overall grades, the other team won't have anyone who's truly a genius at one specific thing. Suddenly, Superhuman Yap's eyes lock onto one of the players. He spots a young man chewing gum right in the middle of the opposing team. His analysis shows that while the players aren't terrible, he's paying very little attention. He then wondered if that young man too had been raised in luxury. The young man stepped up to him, demanding to know what he was staring at and calling him old. The young man realizes the man before him is Superhuman Yap. He still remembers how he once complained about messing up the match against America. On that day, he said that Superhuman Yap didn't even know what a battlefield looked like. Superhuman Yap asked a teammate to swap spots with him for just a moment. He walks over and tells Shim Yong-soo that he is in serious trouble. The young man says he knows exactly how he played in the last match. He insists that acting like you know a game without playing it is a bad look, but Sumop just laughs. The younger player wonders what's so funny. Yalp then asks what his father does, and he replies that he serves as the association's vice president. A shout goes out to every player to step onto the field. Sumop calls him a yeppy and tells them to enter, but the young man grabs him to ask why he has that nickname and why they are asking about his father. He answered that he was curious about what kind of father would raise an idiotic bastard like him. But Manyop opens up about his rough history and explains that he can't stand spoiled kids who have no strength to stand up for themselves. With a sneer, he makes a rude gesture, claims the young man has died, and says he's now ready to fight in the battle. As Manyop's name booms through the arena, the player steps onto the stage. At last, the long-awaited moment arrives as Manyop steps into the arena to play. Even though this match is just a charity game, the crowd watching it will be bigger than ever before. The audience is packed with famous stars, like American team player Gerald Walker and agents Joe Fellman and Jake Rand. As the charity match kicks off, Sulan, one of the 7 heroes, and the Morrow brothers all watch on. They then show that the very first match takes place inside the twisting spiral cave of Aza. The arena is a circle-shaped maze with a hidden tunnel filled with scary monsters like spider skeletons and snakes. The match will be between Team Love, composed of current national selection members, and Team Hope, featuring the hero from 17,